Guys, like, comment, subscribe, share this video, especially if you love college football as much as I do. There are a few teams out there that I see that at least has a chance to beat Georgia. I don't really see anybody on the regular schedule. I see teams like South Carolina and even Auburn, teams that are improving, even Florida, that have a chance to at least have a good game with Georgia, but talent-wise, I don't think they can beat them. But one team I'd like to talk about in particular on the regular schedule is Ole Miss. Ole Miss is always a formidable opponent when they show up to play. They can play with the best teams out there. They play really good football. Their offense is very explosive. Their defense, I think, is on the right direction. So I think this is year 4 with Lane Kiffin, right? Who's very experienced now as a head football coach. He's been a winner. If they don't beat Georgia, they'll give them a tough fight because it's SEC against SEC. And Ole Miss has a bunch of talented players. So if anybody can beat them in the regular year, it is Ole Miss. Now let's talk about teams outside their schedule. From the West, Texas A&M, a very talented football team. A team who I think is going to get a lot better with Bobby Petrino running the offense. Jimbo Fisher is still the head coach, so he knows what he's doing. He's been a winner throughout his whole career. I think he's won, 70-80% of his games as a head football coach. He's been national champion. He's won his conference in Florida State before several times in a row. So I think this is a step in the right direction for him. And Texas A&M has a lot of talent. They can play with anybody in the country. Now, I didn't say they'd beat anybody, but they can play with anybody. And they show up and play their best football, play good fundamentally. They don't hurt themselves with mistakes. They somehow make it to the SEC championship and play Georgia. Anything can happen. It's possible. Being realistic, talent-wise. Speaking of talent, LSU is another really good football team who I think should be in the top 5 to start this year. Jaden Daniels, my only issue is him with not being able to beat teams by throwing the football on third down. He ran the football a lot, and he got hurt a lot because of it. And the offensive line had a hard time protecting him. So if all that is fixed and LSU's defense improves, they could beat Georgia or anybody else who's number 1. They really can. I mean, they're a pretty good football team last year. Florida State beat them, and everybody thought they were dead. I actually defended LSU, and I said that they're going to get a lot better from that loss, and they were a pretty good football team. It's just they lost to a team like Florida State who has taken so many steps in the right direction. I'll get to FSU in a second. Do I think they're a team? LSU, Alabama, the usual suspect. Alabama is loaded with talent every year. Nick Saban's the GOAT of college football. And speaking of Nick and Kirby, 4 out of 5 meetings that they've had as head coaches, he's beaten them 4 times. So with that being said, if anybody can beat Georgia, it's Alabama and Nick Saban. Now let's look outside the conference. Do I see anybody from the Big Ten? Michigan is a possible suspect. This is year 3 with Jim Harbaugh. Not as a head coach, but about to be his 3rd year in which I think they're going to be very, 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 very successful. If you look at how they played fundamentally, I make a big deal with penalties and stuff because Michigan doesn't commit those. They end up beating teams with better talent like Ohio State because of those things, the small details. They're a very physical team. They brought back most of their defense. Their offense has J.J. McCarthy at quarterback still. Blake Corum is still there, so he'll be an impact somehow. Donovan Edwards is back. So I think Michigan is in the right direction. They are a team that if don't beat, they can at least compete with Georgia. I'm not going off that Orange Bowl 2 years ago. That doesn't really mean anything at this point. Ohio State, they're a team that can. They're loaded with talent every year. Ryan Day is a winning coach. So if anybody can beat Georgia, it is Ohio State. Penn State, I'd say, yeah. I mean, they're in the right direction. The only teams that beat them were Michigan and Ohio State. And out of those 2 teams, Penn State can, at worst, beat one of those teams with the players that they got and Manny Diaz as defensive coordinator. They won the Rose Bowl, so that's a lot of momentum going into 2023. And finally, I think Florida State has a realistic chance to beat Georgia if they play in the playoff or a national championship game. Jordan Travis is a monster at quarterback. He is so good, you can either shut him down with his legs or with his arm, but you can't do it both ways for 4 quarters. You just can't do it. No one has been able to do that. And defensively, Florida State's got a bunch of monsters on that defensive line. They recruit well. They've got bigger bodies up front with at least 300 pounds or more. They got Jared Verse on the edge as a defensive end. Man, boy, oh boy, Florida State's coming. If they don't win the national championship, at best, I think they can at least make a playoff appearance. And if they play their best football, I think they can beat Georgia or somebody else up there who's number 1. They really can. They got it. Why not? So, and out there, Washington too. Why not?